Okay. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Family and Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Thursday, 4th of March, 2021. This meeting is being held virtually, and if I can ask that all members keep themselves on mute unless it's their turn to speak. I'm going to start with the first item, which is apologies for absence.
Received apologies from Councillor Campbell.
Okay, do we have any from the floor? No? Okay, thank you. Item 2 is the minutes of the previous meeting. Yes, Mr. Lennox.
When you've been around for a long time, you can be part of the woodwork, but I was at the last meeting and I'm not listed as being at the last meeting. Also, I noticed that we're not invited to this meeting.
Right.
Sorry, it's just actually a new committee management software system that we've had installed. That's why your name's actually not included on the agenda letter. It's just that it's a totally different system and we can't actually maneuver it, if you know what I mean, very well.
Can you make sure that the minutes are amended that I was at the last meeting, please?
I will do, no problem.
Okay, thank you. Are we okay with the minutes for the last meeting with that amendment? In favour? Thank you. Item 3, disclosure of members' interests. Do we have anything to declare? No. Okay. So item 4 is the forward plan of key decisions.
Thanks, Chair. The forward plan's there just for members to know. There's nothing on it specifically for facts.
That's great. Thanks very much for that, Chris. So we'll move on to item 5, which is the annual report for Education and Skills Service 19 and 20. And I'm going to pass that over to Audrey Kingham for that report, please.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. So this is the annual Education Skills Report for the academic year 2019-20. It's safe to say an unprecedented year for education, where the skills and expertise, resilience and leadership has been tested, and the work to support our key workers can be nothing short of outstanding. So my recommendations for this report are for the committee to review the contents of the headline report. There is an attached, and you will have copies of the digital annual report, and recognise the performance given the significant challenges of the global pandemic against operating circumstances, and really the valuable support that's been provided to schools. Review the key areas for improvement in our education and skills priorities moving forward, particularly how this informs how we review, revisit and shape future improvements and our work programme as a service. Support the development of the skills strategy for Northumberland, which supports our schools to build career pathways. Develop the skills of our young people and adults to be able to have successful and sustainable jobs underpinning the economic priorities for Northumberland. And to develop a coherent approach to work with businesses, building relationships which benefit industry skills, schools and indeed all of our residents. So this report relates to 3 areas of our corporate plan: the connecting, learning and thriving in particular. And there are a number of key issues and areas really to note, and I'll just quickly run through those. So our report today is presented in 2 ways. So you have a written front cover report, which gives the headlines, and then you have a digitally optimised report, which provides viewers with a visual view of the performance against national averages in 2019-20. It considers the impact in particular of the work undertaken and demonstrates the impact for our children and young people in the last academic year. Performance should not be compared against previous years due to calculated grade processes and dynamic late changes to outcomes reporting. And when I'm sat here this time next year, I'll be saying the same thing, because we have a very different process again for this academic year's outcome. Partnership working with schools has never been better. And this has been recognised by schools themselves, it's fair to say. The role of the central team, and that includes schools HR and our health and safety team, to support schools has been important, really important to provide that assurance and interpretation of guidance at a time of rapid change, daily changing, sometimes twice within a day. Schools and skills maintain safe environments in which to continue their learning throughout. We certainly embrace the digital world, and the responsibility to become even more innovative and prepare our children and young people for a changed world is a high priority. The approach by the Inclusive Ed Services team, it's important, again, priority to be able to work across the services supporting some of our children with the greatest needs and to meet the rapidly emerging needs as a result of the global pandemic changing lives, learning and futures. And of course, the Northumberland Learning and Skills portfolio, as reported in the last Facts Committee, is changing to meet the priorities for Northumberland, the economic priorities. And we spent a lot of time talking about that. And of course, our skills service sits within the education and skills portfolio. So just to move on, and I'll do some highlights. I'll just do a small piece of background and then pick out some highlighted areas. Just take a check at the priorities, and then there'll be time for some questions at the end. So without doubt, the academic year in 1920, it's been a really experienced seismic change for the whole education and skills sector. I don't think anybody trains for this kind of work, but the whole team and all of our schools, teachers, all of our support staff, every single member of staff that works in education. This was never in a training program, but I have to say they have absolutely stepped up and made the best that they possibly could out of a really challenging year. So I think we would describe the academic year as a year of two halves, and we were doing really well and making good progress in that first year. And then probably around this time last year, we were beginning to see just the changes that were emerging and starting to have an impact. So I think it's really important to highlight the resilience, the determined approach by our early year setting school skills and our education support to support our children, families and carers. It's outstanding, and it's really commendable, the work that they've undertaken. It's that unwavering approach for me that they took, which was about keeping the child and the young person at the heart of decisions and really making sure that our work practices were able to wrap around schools to support the children and their wider families. As the sector continues to recover, respond and reflect, and we're at an interesting phase now of just ready to more fully open schools. Our schools have remained open throughout lockdown, but to more fully open to a greater audience moving forward next week. I think it's really important that we highlight and are focused on that greater change and impact to improve the life chances for our children moving forward, particularly the recovery education phase that we will move into. So just taking a look at some of our key areas, and if I look at early years and key stages first, you will note in the reports that we've given some key headlines and then given some impact statements, really to demonstrate some of that work that's been done. It's different. It's been a very different academic year, so the annual report is different to the way that it perhaps has been formatted previously. We still have some really good results to talk about, and you will see in the early years bullet points, particularly around our reach to 2-year-olds. You'll see that we're placed 3rd in the country and not in the county. Our 3- and 4-year-old take-up offer reported figures hit 115%, and of course we do take some places from out of county, so we exceed the volumes that we would measure against in our county places, and that places us first nationally. So some superb results in terms of that. What we don't have are the SATs results to be able to give any outcomes which we would typically report at this point in the year. But it is really important to say that that emphasis and focus by our school improvement teams has not lessened in any way, shape or form. We've had to adjust in the same way that schools have had to adjust. but that continued approach and that depth and breadth of work has continued. And actually, we're beginning to see that as Ofsted is now starting to revisit our schools and look a little more deeper, we're starting to see that schools have taken effective action. And just to pick another one out in that area, key stage 4 results, again, based on centre assessed grades, calculated grades, as I noted earlier, and all standard was higher. And as we know, the public examinations were cancelled last year, and our outcomes improved on the 3 headline measures that were published. At key stage 5, our average point score, both in academic and vocational, increased by over 6 points. And whilst we still have a small amount of improvement to make, we do sit very close to the national average, which is really good. And there are a number of impact statements there which are reflected within the digital format too. Our virtual school, which actually sits under children's social care, but is really relevant in terms of our annual education and skills reporting. Clearly the headline and highlight within last academic year was their really strong performance, and to celebrate that strong performance at the ILAC inspection. The team have really adapted throughout the last academic year, and Sarah, I'm sure, we'll talk to some extent around the elected home later on. But actually the work that's been done by that team to really wrap around individuals and make sure that they were able to continue their learning and support them in their individual circumstances was absolutely outstanding and nothing short of amazing. Just to really keep each of those children engaged and really make sure that they were able to be ready for when schools reopened and to be able to continue that good work. Picking up around our inclusive education and special educational needs, you will have seen that we're out to consultation on a SEND strategy, a revised SEND strategy for Northumberland. That's been launched, and we're getting a huge amount of feedback to the strategy that's gone out there. So really good in terms of that overall. Our key focus continued to work with parents and families, particularly around some co-production work and across partners to ensure that we've got the right support at the right time. And our inclusive education services have been really key to some of that recovery work for our children, preparing them to come back into school. In terms of looking at the impact statements, you will see some significant stats in there. With more than 50% of our schools receiving support from 3 or more of our specialist SEN teams. So that gives you a gauge of the amount of work that's continued to go on, wrapping around and supporting our schools. The Learning and Skills Service, just some highlights in there for you again, and you will recall that this report was taken to the last facts committee in greater detail. So although I'm not proposing to go into that area, I will just give a couple of highlights in the impact statements again. Our overall apprenticeship achievement, 19% above the national average. So some continued good work and some tenacity to be able to get these really good results and maintain the work across the year. School organisation and resources, again, significant amount of work in this team, not least around delivering and continuing to deliver their capital programme and development throughout the pandemic with many challenges. And I have to say this team, in addition, also became extremely adaptable to be able to be delivering PPE around the county, to be picking up, supporting, making sure that we're placing staff in schools to help that resilience in schools. So a really huge amount of work, particularly with our inclusion team working in there. Sue will talk later on in the exclusions report that is here, but actually we have stood back up the task and finish group, and that work is continuing going forward. I'm really pleased that a challenging year with a half a year of full attendance and then half a year of obviously restricted attendance, but we were able to report that exclusion statistic continued to reduce, and Sue will give you some more good news later on in the specific report. And actually, the last bullet point in the school organisation, throughout lockdown, we had almost 306,000 attendances in Northumberland. And interestingly, just last week, we were quoted in Schools Week and compared, I think, to Harrow. Just in the last month's January's attendance, where Harrow was circa 2% and Northumberland was circa 10% attendance rates. So the work that our schools and our central team to continue and encourage that engagement is really having a strong positive impact. Moving on, I can't talk about education and skills without talking about our performance team. So we have a number of corporate teams who really underpin both the schools work, but also the central team work. So our performance team do a lot of analysis. In fact, they did a huge amount of work throughout COVID, which was particularly related to tracking our pupils with EHCPs and our learners in post-16 settings with EHCPs. And they were really adaptive and really dynamic to be able to support what needed to be done. I think the important bit is we knew where all of our pupils and students were throughout the lockdown. And in fact, we're still in lockdown 3, only for a few more days now. But we continue to know where all of our pupils and our students are and how they are engaging and continuing to make progress, or the rate at which they continue to make progress. And indeed, our schools HR and health and safety teams have been really part of the extended education team. We do talk about a wraparound service to be able to make sure that schools feel they're being supported, and that's both a support and a challenge. So we offer support and we offer challenge in equal amounts where that's required, and make sure that we're able to ensure that the right things done at the right time and the right decisions are supported. And again, that team, or those teams, should I say, both continue to be part of our weekly head teacher briefing. And we started that week 1 in pandemic, and at 1:30 today we'll be meeting again. So we continue every single week with that approach. I think it's really important because we've noted, particularly with our wraparound services, that we've had some school voices being really well represented in health and safety forums, but also in national HR forums. And it would be remiss of me to say, not to say rather, that actually our role as an education team is to be the voice of our schools and to ensure that we're making sure that we're evidencing how we're doing things in Northumberland, why we're different. So our attendance really stuck out against the national profile throughout lockdown. For a very positive reason, we were significantly more engaging. And we ensured that was well represented, and David and I routinely and regularly champion the work that is undertaken by schools and our post-16 providers too across the county in Northumberland. In conclusion, just to put 1 or 2 points together. So I've already said it a couple of times, but without doubt, one of the most challenging and remarkable years, certainly in my career within education, and for everybody across the education sector. The approach working alongside schools, including our wider services and providing supporting infrastructure, has proven to be one of the most positive and biggest impacts to partnership working, and has really changed how we work moving forward. The outcomes for our children and young people, we can't measure those against performance in previous years. We can measure them against national averages, and that's what we've attempted to do throughout the report. I think for me, the most important element is that our young people were prepared and supported with the grades that they needed to be able to progress to their destination of choice, whether that's the sixth form, post-16 study, university, or into employment. And those destinations are really key in terms of a priority moving forward. The rapid change to digital learning, exceptionally well supported with resource and staff expertise throughout the year. And actually, it's now a more routine way of life. It's still not without its challenges as we work with schools and industry to make sure that our children are able to access high quality learning through devices, platforms, but also through our systems. And it really allows them to be able to continue into, the words new normal seem to be rather overused, but how we move to a new dynamic approach to education. And certainly, in terms of the central team, refocusing the education and skills priorities has been a big piece of work for us to ensure that we're all well placed to be able to respond. Know where we need to improve our performance, because we've still got some areas that we need to get better. But it is ever challenging. It's an unprecedented environment, but at the same time, it's exciting and desirable. And it's really pivotal to support the recovery of the education curriculum. You will see we have a new education czar, and we're beginning to see the emerging recovery proposals and discussions. And actually, for me, it starts with quality first teaching and ensuring that our children are well supported. Our head teachers, our staff, all of our school staff, our teachers and central staff are all cited on the key issues, the key priorities, and we're making sure that everybody has a wraparound support. Working together in partnership certainly puts us on a positive foot to be able to move in the right direction. And that's the summary from the Education and Skills report. There is the digital report, which is the more visual report that's attached. Secondly, you will see a number of, in the digital format, there are a number of hyperlinks that contain fuller and deeper reports. So, for example, if you click on the school organisation report, it won't be there yet because Sue is about to present that report after me. And so it will be uploaded to the system. It is intended that what you have is a summary document with all of the very detailed reports that sit behind there, should you wish to read those. The purpose of the digital report is also to make this much more dynamic. It's a short, sharp read. It gives you the key statistics. It means that you can see at a snapshot how things are doing here in Northumberland. It also means we can replicate this and use it across a number of digital platforms for a whole raft of reasons, rather than necessarily give you a very wordy report. So thank you, Chair. That's my summary for the annual education and skills report for 2019-20.
That's great. Thank you very much for that, Audrey. I'm going to go straight to the Cabinet Member, Guy Renner-Thompson. Do you want to add anything, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. This is a report that comes from myself and Audrey and Kath, so happy to present it. I mean, I don't need to tell any of you that the 1920 year has been a challenge. Our schools have been open only to the children of key workers and those with education and healthcare plans since late March, a situation never before seen in this country. Important distinction to make. People keep saying schools have been closed. Schools have not been closed. Schools have just been open to a restricted number of pupils. You know, the education and children's social care has been hugely affected by COVID, and I would say more than any other department of this council, and I mean that. The pandemic has not stopped the work of our children's services team, who have played a vital role in supporting our schools to remain open in a safe and controlled way. Has been able to support the health and care professionals through continued access to school through the pandemic lockdown. They've also worked tirelessly to support home learning for the children unable to get into school. New methods and systems have been created in such a short space of time, some of which may well live on as digital learning becomes more prominent, a change that has been long talked about but has been quickly accelerated by the pandemic. All of our teachers and support staff need to be commended for their exemplary actions over the last year. Without them, from the head teachers and their exec teams to the gardeners, handymen and dinner ladies, the teachers, teaching assistants, secretaries and backroom office staff, and anyone else I've missed off, none of the last year and this report would have been possible without you. So thank you if you're watching this. Onto the report itself. Education continues to improve in leaps and bounds under this administration. To pick out some examples, the fact that our early years offer is third in the whole country should be a source of great pride. The number of our primary and secondary schools rated good or outstanding has increased, and the number of children permanently excluded has dropped, two key indicators for any educational authority. Our rankings are up and our exclusions are down. There is still a lot more to do, but we're committed to every child in Northumberland, be they in one of our schools, an academy, a free school. I don't care what sort of school they're in. We will continue to work hard to improve our school outcomes, to improve social mobility, to give industry and services a homegrown workforce fit for the future, and to give every child the best start in life they can possibly get. I really like this report. I think the online system works well. It's got all the information and links in that you need. And it's a good bit of bedtime reading for anyone. I think all members of this council should be taking an interest in it. And happy to take questions from there.
Thank you, Guy. Do we have any questions, please? Yes, John.
Thank you for those kind words, Guy. An excellent report, Audrey and Guy. The first question is, I think it's shown the value, as you've recognised, Guy, of the teaching associations, employee associations and the council working very well together. 2 or 3 years ago, the HR element of the council was taking a bit of a battering as schools academised, and basically they went with their own HR. I've found, and I suspect Lynn has found the same, that working with the local authority HR has been excellent this year in supporting some staff in very vulnerable situations. As a consequence of that, has the situation with HR and schools levelled off, or is it starting to improve?
John, can I answer that? Do you mean in terms of the engagement?
Sorry, yes. Sorry, I meant that. Has there been a pickup in the HR, or is there greater interest from schools regarding local authority HR?
There is greater interest. I mean, there are two things to consider. So it is under an SLA arrangement, and that is contractual. So it has marginally increased, but I know our HR service are working with schools to try to encourage that, because actually they have provided, and I'm really pleased that you recognise that, John, because that has been super. And I think the work that we've done with our trade union colleagues has been really good across this year for sure. I think the issue for me is every week we meet and there is an HR section on the head teachers, and that's the really valuable partnership work that I'm talking about that has begun to make a really big difference. So I'd like to see that throughout this year we see some return back to working with the local authority schools HR team. It's certainly one of the areas that I'm encouraging around our traded services aspect.
Excellent, thank you very much.
Do you have any more questions? David Lennox.
We all recognise it's been a really demanding year this year, and the pressures on teachers, etc., has been very significant. Certainly, I wouldn't have appreciated being a teacher at this particular time. And it's really encouraging to see some significant improvements, as the report indicates. However, on pages 26 and 27, there are a number of instances where we are below the national average. And the area that concerns me personally is the fact that English and maths is for post-16 is below the national average, and that's an area I think of real concern when it's a basic subjects such as English and maths, and I don't know whether there's anyone want to comment on that.
I think yes, Councillor Lennox, if I can come back on that, post-16 English and maths is a really challenging area. What you must remember here is that our children have gone all the way through the school system. They've not managed to get a C, because actually I might be dealing in the post-16 sector with those who were still doing the letter grades, or indeed a grade 4 or 5 at their English and mathematics. And then they come to a post-16 setting and the expectation is that they need to continue. Within the post-16 at Northumberland, remember that we work with some of the most challenging young learners who come to work with us, and they come to us because we're able to offer a greater wraparound service. So actually the journey and the distance that we need to work on is even tougher and even harder. but that doesn't mean to say that we're not trying, and it's a key priority moving forward. You're absolutely right, because our ambition to be able to move our children and young people into jobs in Northumberland means that they have to have that baseline. And in part of our priority work moving forward, we're putting a new supported framework in to be able to give even greater support with that, both for our adults who come through in terms of the post-16 sector, but also particularly within our care leaver sector as well.
Thank you. My particular personal concern was in the case of maths, because I know many years ago, Northumberland had an excellent reputation in the area of maths, outstanding. And it's a bit sad when you look at the figure at the moment to see, you know, post-16, the maths particularly, and English are below the national average.
Okay, Guy, did you want to come in there?
Yeah, just reiterate what Audrey said, that it's a key priority for the council, because our early years and primary education stats are excellent, and then that seems to fall off into secondary education, and it's working out how we can keep that momentum going once they get into secondary education. I mean, earlier in the year, Audrey did a fantastic skills audit report of all the different schools in the county, and where all the industry is and where the businesses are and what we're going to need going forward. And you know, English and maths is a key part of that. So, but I would point out again that it has improved in the last 4 years. You know, we're in a lot better position than we were 4 years ago. But there is still work to do, and we do recognise that.
Thank you, Guy. Kath.
Thanks, Chair. Just to advise as well, for those who may not know, we are still involved as a region in the Opportunity North East programme that the government announced 2 years ago. So 4 of our schools are involved in that programme as well, and we're hoping to be able to learn from the targeted interventions that are being provided to those schools in order to spread that learning across the county.
Thank you, Kath. John?
Just a minor point, seeing as David mentioned English and maths. Paragraph 2.4.4 regarding NEET, I think needs some attention at the end. It's a bit convoluted at the end if you have a look at that one. But if I could refer you also to 2.6.2, where it talks about 99% of schools having signed into the data sharing agreement. I'm just wondering, 99% seems a funny number, so why is it not 100%, or do we have a rogue school?
I'm happy to take that. I'm not sure we know the exact answer to that. I think we're continuously requesting for those signatures, and sometimes it's just a matter of that it just hasn't been returned in a timely way. So we're continually asking for that information.
All right, lovely. Thanks, Kath.
Thanks, Kath. Do you have any more questions? Russ?
Chair. Thanks. Can I just join in the praise for the education service? I think the job they've done in this remarkably difficult time is really outstanding. What I would like is both NCC and North of Tyne to press nationally that we take the opportunity to review how we deliver to our children, how we assess our children, and more importantly for me, that we redress the balance between the theoretical and practical skills. One thing that COVID has shown us is that balance has been wrong, and we need to really emphasise the practical side of things. I think just ask that we do all we can to press for that nationally. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Russ. Wayne?
Thank you, Chair. Again, apologies about my bandwidth, so the camera is off. So I just wanted to pick up again. We've had a lot of support and praise about this report. I'm delighted that since 2017, obviously, when I took on the role as cabinet leader on education, that there was a very clear, very well understood importance of improving education performance, because actually it's one of the best ways that we can level up our communities to give young people the opportunity to actually get a good education, which will help them to move into better employment. So that's a really good thing, and I'm glad that that has been continued and articulated really well within this report. So just a couple of things which I just wanted to pick up on, if I can. One of them is quite a wide point, but I think John Sanderson kind of touched on it. This pandemic has shown us a lot of things that we weren't aware of. And one of the things which I think it has demonstrated is the phenomenal ability of local authorities to actually do things and do things well. I say this as a conservative. I have no issue about academies, free schools, or local authority schools. As everybody knows, I've always said, I'm not bothered what institution you're in. I just want outstanding for our young people. But what this has demonstrated is, and I hope the government have actually understood this as well, and I think they have, is the vital role that local education authorities have played in delivering education for our young people over this period of the pandemic. Had it not been for education authorities, Northumberland in particular, with the phenomenal input from staff, we would not have been able to deliver the performance that we have. Combined with our schools and all of those support staff, we have made an absolutely phenomenal impact on the lives of those young people who've been able to get to school, but also those who've had to do home learning. So I think there's a really good message which needs to come out from all parties here, and I'm being totally non-political on this point, is what we have seen is the role of local authorities is intrinsic to our communities, and we should celebrate that. So if you want to take that as a kind of a widespread congratulations to all the officers, that's exactly what it is. But yes, that's part of the learning. The other thing which I want to touch on very quickly is some elements on the report. I am delighted around the focus that we've had since 2017 on special education needs. One of the things I discovered when I first took over the portfolio was working with Kath McAvoy-Carr was the improvements that we could make within our educational healthcare plans, and that process went through and we have improved that. Why would a healthcare plan make a difference? Because actually that sets and frames the support that a young person needs in school. So for me, that was a really important thing, and the massive investment that we've put into special education needs with the investment into Ashington. It's also gone into Hexham, and of course the recent announcement about the 11 plus special education needs school in Blythe. So I think that's a really important thing, and I love the fact that we are involving and co-producing work with our parents, because that says that we value and we actually really do understand some of the significant challenges that some young people have who either have an EHCP or actually have a SEND registration. So that's one of the points. Ross mentioned there, and I think it's important to pick up on the role of the local authority and the combined authority. As you're probably aware, one of the last things they did before leaving the combined authority was drive through the joint school improvement strategy. I know that that has been shared with this committee chair, but actually that's a really good mechanism by which we can coordinate and ensure that there is equality of delivery and focused delivery across the three authorities within the combined authority area. So if anybody has forgotten about it, please, you can Google it. It's on the combined authority. It should be on the council site as well. The joint school improvement strategy. I worked on that for about 1.5 years with officers. Absolutely fantastic piece of work. We need to get the education challenge driven through as well, which I know that Councillor Richard Dodd is working on, along with Audrey Kingham and other officers. But I think what COVID has exposed is that we had, before COVID, a differential in performance between our children in the northeast and those in the south. There were great differences. On average, you were performing better if you were in the south. COVID has exposed that. We need to ensure that we do lots of work to bring that learning back so that our children actually benefit from the education which we're able to deliver through our phenomenal schools and teaching workforce. So I think there are fantastic opportunities to build on this report and continue to improve. So I cannot praise officers enough for the work that they've done, and our school staff and our support staff. And you know what? Parents as well, because they must be as sick as a chip sitting at home educating their kids, thinking, you know what, I thought teachers didn't have a lot of work to do. Well, welcome to the real world. And hopefully, as we get back to a new sense of normality, we can address some of those great differentials, move forward, and actually make this place the dynamic place it should be. And this proves we can do it because we're already doing it. So hats off to all of you. Well done.
Thank you for that, Wayne. As a parent going through the home education, it's amazing how many children think you know all the answers. And at the moment, Google's an amazing thing when you just refer them to that. But just picking up on what you said there, Wayne, page 24 of the report highlights some key messages and very apt wording, I think. A turbulent and extraordinary time for education, business and communities. Unwavering dedication of our council staff and across all school settings and support services. The fact that the support offered continues to improve as a result of the tireless efforts and dedication of teachers, support staff and partners, efforts that have triumphed through adversity. It mentions an ever-changing landscape and recognises that there is always more to do. While this report, as others that this committee has seen, has always looked to address those areas where we can do better and how we can achieve that, some of the achievements that have been made here need to be recognised. So as Councillor Daly just mentioned about how the South always seemed to do better than the North, some of the things that are in here, and I'm going to mention some, has come to highlight some things for the North. So Northumberland was ranked the top authority nationally for first preference in secondary schools at 97.3%, and second nationally for primary preference at 97.9%. The third highest in the country for early learning, taking up at 2 years old, 92%. First nationally for 3 to 4 year olds, a take up of 115%, because we've got people coming from outside of our county to attend our nurseries. The national average is 60.4% for EHCPs completed in 20 weeks, and we're achieving 87.4%. No permanent exclusions from primary schools since March 2020. Ofsted rated good or better primary schools has risen to 91% above the national average. Secondary exclusions fell by 43%. Persistent secondary absentee rate lower than the national average. Apprenticeships and traineeships in 2020, a huge 2,240 starts. That's despite the current pandemic. 100% of asylum seeker children placed in our schools. GCSE results for looked after children were the best since the virtual school opened, and more than twice the pupils achieving the basics in 2020 than in 2019. Absence rates for learners with SEN showing a significant reduction and exclusions continuing to fall. We had 83 apprenticeship achievement with a national average only being 64%. And 100% of schools and early years providers who requested PPE support package in the first lockdown had one delivered by our staff. So these don't just happen by themselves and be difficult to attain on any normal year, but given consideration to the struggles and difficulties that have been added over this pandemic period, I feel again results such as these require a sincere thanks to so many people who work so hard to achieve all of these results. But they don't just stop there. They're working for more and working to do better. And as Councillor Daly said, there's so many people deserve our thanks. Council officers, teachers, parents, support staff. And I, for one, want to pass on my thanks to all those people. So I have the recommendations within the report. Do we all agree with those recommendations? Agreed. Okay, thank you. Next item on the report is item 6, the update of the school organisation plan. And I'm going to pass you on to Sue Avison for that one, please.
Thank you, Councillor Swinburne. Yeah, I'll start by doing an introduction, a little bit of background, and then move on to some of the changes that have happened within the data in the school organisation plan since our previous publication. So the first version of the current school organisation plan 2018 to 2021 was approved by Cabinet in June 2018 for the purpose of bringing together key school place planning data, information, all into one document for the benefit of schools, academies, officers and other interested parties. The first update of the plan was in June 2019, and this is the third and final update of the current version of the school organisation plan that is contained at appendices 1 to the report. It sets out the context of Northumberland with regard to its size, its demographics, the issues relating to rurality. It also provides information regarding schools, including each partnership, where additional school places will be required within the pupil forecasting period, currently up to 2027. Sorry. Some key points to note in the updated school organisation plan are that the number of schools and academies in the county is now at 164, and that's following the closure of West Woodburn First School in August 2020. The number of the academies in the county continues to grow, and we now have 48 academies across the county, and that's an increase from 40 as of the last update of the plan. And this is predicted to increase to 50 by April 2022, subject to no further conversions taking place in that period. And also to note that academies now make up nearly 30% of the education establishments across Northumberland. We've also seen that there are now 38,995 children as of October 2020 of statutory school age on the rolls of all types of schools, excluding our special schools in Northumberland. And this represents an overall fall of 2% compared to the previous years. So you can see our birth rate is on a decline in Northumberland, and as a result of that, we now have 17% surplus places in schools and academies overall across the county. And while this overall figure really masks the wide variation between schools and partnerships, as you can see, Seaton Valley Partnership has just over 9% surplus places, whereas some of our higher surplus places in the far north and west, with Berwick having 34% of surplus places and Hayden Bridge that have got 41%. So a strategic plan to manage these surplus places more effectively is being developed by our school organisation and resources team during this academic year, and will be subject to a further report and the further reiteration of the school organisation plan. Also to note, we have carried out some more detailed information in this current reiteration of the school organisation plan around special educational needs and the pressure points that we're finding in place planning for that sector. So again, you'll see that the number of pupils with ASD and SEMH continue to rise in the county. And as I've said, all the data on this is contained in section 6 of the school organisation plan. That details how the demand for special school places has grown in Northumberland over the last 4 years, and this will continue to be a key focus of work for the next reiteration of the plan, and we'll focus on using this information to make predictions for the future demand of places, particularly for SEN, in terms of their primary need categories as well. So I think that's the update. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sue, for that report. Guy, you want to come in on that?
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. Like Sue says, this isn't compulsory for local authorities to produce one of these anymore, but I support the fact that we do, and I think we have a particular issue in the county around surplus school places, and if we don't continue doing these reports, then we won't be able to track that, and it has a large input into our schools capital plan. You know, as you know, if you have a school that's built for 200 students and it's only got 100 students in, you get paid on your per pupil funding, but you're still having to pay for a building which has the maintenance and admin costs of 200 people building. That can cause issues for your school finances. So it's very important that you continue doing these reports, at least until hopefully someday soon our surplus places issue has been solved.
Thank you, Guy. If I could just point out, while I think on, at the beginning of the last item, we lost Councillor Dickinson, who's having broadband problems, and it appears he's not able to rejoin us. So he's messaged us a few times. He can't even dial back in because he doesn't have a proper phone signal either. So he's not being able to rejoin the meeting. Do we have any questions on that item, please? Anyone who would like to ask anything? It is quite a detailed item, and there's a significant amount of information on there. And there's a lot of detail around how each area's planned admission numbers are calculated, and confirms information that we've heard at this committee on a number of occasions, that in the majority of cases, there's been a decline in child intake in our schools, which in some areas seems to have reached like a plateau. It highlights the complexities involved in planning applications from developers when it comes to the calculations of school places, and this is something that's very relevant. As an elected member, I've been questioned on a number of occasions about how there can possibly be enough spaces in the schools with all of the previously approved housing development, and I'm probably not alone in that. There's probably other elected members, on this committee and across the council who get those questions on regular occasions. So while this explains how this is calculated and the steps taken to expand where necessary, I think this information would perhaps be beneficial to all elected members. While I appreciate that this is due to be updated and is available via this committee's online reports, I was wondering if it's possible to email or send an email to all elected members with a link to this, and also when it comes out, a link to the updated report. I'm conscious that when queries arise from residents, these queries could be passed on to officers, and this takes up officer time and probably delays from officers in responding to members. So I feel that if we could email members out with a link to this report, it will help them understand where the places are, the process in calculating available spaces for schools when applications are submitted by developers, and give a better understanding so that the members can respond themselves to requests from their residents. And just want to ask if we can make that happen, please, so that all members have the information to hand themselves to respond to residents.
Yep, certainly, Mark. We'll definitely make sure every elected member gets a copy of the document. That's
great. I really appreciate that. So the recommendations are to note that the school organisation plan has...
Chair, sorry. Sorry, Chair, for coming in there. Could I ask, if you're asking that to go out to members, could I also ask that that goes out to chairs of governors as well? Because like you, I get regular contacts from certain schools asking about the new building work going on in Cramlington, which was approved a number of years ago, and asking why catchment areas aren't changed and where children should be going. And I think there's a lot of misinformation going around with some schools about whether catchment areas can be changed, should be changed in light of the new building work. So I think it would be helpful if that was also sent out to governing bodies and perhaps even head teachers, just so they understand the process, which I know Sue has got down to a fine art in terms of catchment areas, where new building is, the formula which is used for calculating houses related to children coming through the system. I just think it would help things if that could be done as well, Chair.
Is that possible, Sue?
Yes, certainly. We automatically send it through to head teachers and to chairs of governors as well when it's published. So yeah, we'll make sure that's highlighted to them as well.
That's great. Really appreciate that. Thank you. So Recommendations are to note the school organisation plan 1821 has had a final update with the latest data and information on schools since the previous version from June 19. This reflects the changed data and school circumstances over the last 18 months and known changes in the near future. But the latest update to the school organisation plan has been delayed in order to prioritise the more urgent work with the schools and academies that has arisen for the school organisation and resources team as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. But the updated school organisation plan will be circulated to schools and other partners to comment before publication in March 21 if approved by the Cabinet. And a new school organisation plan 21 for, I'm assuming that's 21 to 24, will be produced in the summer 21 and will be brought to Cabinet for approval in September for subsequent publication. Do we agree with those recommendations? Agreed. Thank you. So we'll move on to item 7, which is the school capital programme update. And that's Sue again, please.
Thank you, Councillor Swinburne. So yes, the report in front of you today is to update you on the process and the delivery of the school capital investment programme since October 2018, which is the last time that we brought an update report through to Scrutiny. So I'll start by giving you some outline of some of the key issues that we face, highlight each of the developments under each of the programmes, and then hopefully be able to share with you some of the images of some of the projects that have actually been delivered as we've been unable to organise site tours and actually organise visits for you to see in person the work that the team have undertaken. So really just to start, the condition of many of our school buildings in Northumberland remains an ongoing challenge, with backlog maintenance costs currently being in excess of £57 million. The report sets out the variety of ways in which the council addresses these ongoing issues and is also detailed in section 2 of the school capital investment programme. We also have pressures around growing capacity. We spoke in the last report quite a lot about surplus places, but we also have issues around capacity in our schools estate that need to meet the demands for places. So whilst we have 8,684 surplus places across Northumberland, this surplus capacity is rarely in the area of greatest demand for places, and this can result in an increase in the birth rate or as a result of significant new house building development, again which we touched on the in the previous report. The other key issues is securing significant capital investment to support implementation of whole-scale school partnership reorganisations, many of which come through to scrutiny prior to any cabinet approval in terms of reorganisation. So some of the items I'll talk about, I'm sure you'll all be familiar with and will have seen reports come through facts previously. So really to highlight then, the council has invested or agreed to invest over £101 million in delivering schools capital programme since October 2018. There have been 69 projects delivered in 63 schools across the whole of Northumberland, with projects ranging from the value of £19,000 through to £43 million. And details of each of these programmes is contained within the report. As I mentioned, I'll try and summarise those by programmes and key levels of investment across each. So the first programme highlighted in your report is the School Capital Investment Programme, and this is the programme that deals with the backlog maintenance issues that we have across our school estate. A lot more of the smaller jobs, boiler replacements, new roofs, new windows, those are the kind of things that we deal with in terms of that programme. And it's currently funded by capital through grant from central government. So again, over the last 21 months, we have delivered 48 projects across this programme at the value of just over £3.8 million. So again, quite a small team delivering a significant level of investment that has a massive impact on individual schools, keeping them as open again in terms of watertight and safe so that our schools can continue to operate. We also have quite a successful record in terms of bidding for external capital funding. And in the last 21 months, we've been successful with a schools nursery capital fund. And again, that is to grow capacity in our school nurseries. Again, a lot of the talk that we've talked about, our 115% attending our nurseries, has obviously meant that we've needed to grow some additional capacity. So 2 projects were delivered there at the value of just over £446,000. Our basic need programme, so this is a programme again of central government funding to grow capacity, where we talked about that growth in pupil numbers. So again, we have delivered 7 projects over the last 21 months at the value of £7 million using the grant from central government. That's been in our academies, our mainstream schools, as well as our special educational needs sector as well. So that funding has been well used to grow that capacity. We also have a programme now of Section 106 funding, which is money that comes into the authority based on housing developments. So again, Section 106 money have been used for the first time in Northumberland at Stannington First School, and that's provided a purpose-built standalone modular classroom that has seen an investment of just over £290,000. And again, this is because of housing development in the local area, both at Stannington, both at St Mary's in Stannington and more locally at Hebscott Park. We've then also supported school reorganisation projects, one in Bedlington. So again, to support the age range changes in Bedlington, we've delivered 3 projects there. The first at Benabiscup Academy, that was funded through the Basic Need Grant, as mentioned previously, and also 2 further projects at a further value of £1.6 million at 2 of the local first schools, supporting them to become primary schools. We have also had a growth in special school places. So again, to meet the demands that we've talked about in the school organisation plan, and therefore we've delivered 5 projects, again at the value of just over £3 million in terms of creating additional capacity across our special school estate. I think, as previously mentioned as well by Councillor Daly, I think it was, that work is also progressing on the DFE delivery of a special school, and that has got a target date of September 2022 for opening. Although again, this programme has been delayed slightly in terms of its approval through COVID, and therefore the DFE are currently indicating that that date may not be achievable. But we're currently going through a procurement exercise, so we'll be able to report back in more detail on the programme for that school moving forward. We've also continued to invest in major capital projects across Northumberland, and more recently we've delivered 2 larger scale projects in our first and primary sector, with 2 new build projects being completed again over the last 21 months at Darras Hall Primary and Morpeth First School, again at the value of £12.6 million, 100% of which was funded from the council's own resources. We've also supported a reorganisation in Hayden Bridge. So again, the council funded 4 projects there at the value of £5.2 million. And work is also progressing on converting the old Hultwhistle Middle School to become a primary school. And again, with the council making a further investment there at just over £2.4 million to convert that school, which will hopefully open in the spring term. Although we have had some issues more recently with the weather out at Hultwhistle, so hopefully we'll still be on programme for that. And then we move on to our major achievement, probably that's already been mentioned a couple of times, I think, during the meeting, is the Ponteland Joint School and Leisure Development. So again, this was the single largest project that NCC has ever delivered at the value of just over £43 million, construction value, just over £43 million. And it brings together Ponteland High School, Ponteland Primary School, a new leisure centre for Ponteland, the library, and the site is also home to the local cricket club, football club, rugby club and archery sporting clubs, all to create a community hub in the centre of Ponteland. And we also built a fire station as well as part of that piece of work. So again, a fantastic achievement that has been delivered in partnership both with the schools, contractors and our own NCC teams across multiple directorates. And work is now ongoing with our next major capital investment at Hexa. That's a project that will bring together Queen Elizabeth High School and Hexa Middle School on the site of the existing high school at a construction value at just over nearly £38 million. Which has been predominantly funded by NCC's own resources, again, but with a contribution from the DFE this time at £11.2 million, because previously the local authority was successful in bidding for funding as part of the Priority Schools Building Programme. So that investment has been brought together to deliver the programme in partnership. So work is progressing really well, and we are progressing on programme with phase 1 of the works on target to be completed for September 2021. With the demolition, construction of the bus drop-off and pick-up and the grass pitches will also be complete by April 2022. So again, I think a lot of the things we've talked about this morning have been around the challenges COVID have put in place. But again, obviously our partners delivering the construction as well as our own teams have been able to work around that, and as you can see have made some fantastic achievements this in the last 21 months overall, and some key developments happened very, very quickly in short spaces of time under very challenging circumstances. So if that's okay, I think that's the end of my talking, but I would like to also show you perhaps some of the images, if I can get it all to work, in terms of in terms of what we've actually seen. Let's see. Hopefully that's working for everybody. Can you see that? Sorry, can everybody see that? I can't get any feedback. Am I in the room? Leslie, is that okay?
Yeah, I can see it. You're not on the PowerPoint from that's it. If you do it full screen like that,
that's struggling fine with the signal. Apologies, it's probably all the photographs in the presentation. So yes, just moving through then in terms of capital improvements, we did talk about the backlog maintenance programme, and again just some of the highlights there about 10 boilers replaced, 10 roofs replaced, and you can see some of the major works that go on there right down through to adaptations to buildings for SEN DDA, so that allows our SEN pupils to attend mainstream schools. Some of the images there of some of the projects that we've delivered from Ashdale, and again 48 projects, £3.8 million I think I mentioned. In terms of the nursery capital funding, this is the building that was delivered at Blythe Morpeth Road, again to grow capacity for their nursery. Cramlington Village Primary, a very innovative building there that was built on the school site, again using the grant funding around the nursery capital. Chantry Middle School, in terms of our basic need, we converted a disused old music block at Chantry, again to deliver some additional classroom space in order to meet the demand for school places in Morpeth. Whittrig Middle School, this is the first phase of the work at Whittrig, where we provided a double mobile classroom, and we're doing our second phase at Whittrig this summer as well, so they will also be getting another double classroom because of the growth in numbers in the Seaton Valley Partnership. Blythe Horton Grange, again, because the demands on places in Blythe, we constructed our first modular built school extension. So again, something that was delivered in the matter of weeks rather than months, and has been a real asset to the school. At the same time, we also created additional space at Blythe New Delaval, again to meet the demands for school places, but this was constructed in a more traditional way, in order that we could compare the two methods of delivery and best value in terms of modular construction versus traditional construction. Again, Stannington First School, I think we talked about the funding there from section 106 to deliver the extensions required at Stannington. So you see images there. St Benabiscup, the whole new 6 classroom block that we delivered between May and September of last year. Again, a modular construction, something that was delivered really quickly. Bedlington West End, to support the reorganisation in the partnership, again you can see again another modular construction, which created quite a significant I suppose people watching it all happen and being delivered on one Saturday and Sunday. So yes, it ended up being quite a spectacular event for the local community, sitting in cars eating their sandwiches, watching the whole thing being built. So I'm sure Councillor Wallace will be able to confirm that as well. Hillcrest Special School, again to grow our capacity for special educational needs. We also delivered another double mobile classroom there in the summer of 2020. That also will give us some further capacity for the coming September, again to continue to meet the growth that we're seeing in our special schools. Collingwood, again we grew additional capacity at Collingwood for their sixth form, converting the disused Stewart Start building, and again something that was done in probably the 6 weeks holiday, again to address demands, but yeah, that's working really well for them too. Hexham Priory, we built an extension there as well to create 32 classrooms. I must say it doesn't look like a construction site anymore. There's definitely children in there, but I think this is one of the images that we had while it was being constructed. Astley, again, we have created 2 additional resource provision in 2 of our mainstream schools to support our children with additional needs, maintaining their education in mainstream. So again, we've provided support to Astley and provided another modular accommodation there. And in Seaton Sluice, we've also converted a classroom for the primary ARP there, so that again, they can provide an additional 8 places for children that require additional support. I'm sure committee will also remember that we bought probably 2 or 3 reports through the process of actually converting a site in Ashington to become Ashdale, creating an additional 50 primary places. So a really successful project of converting a disused building again into something that's quite special for those children out at Ashdale. As mentioned, the free school, just some initial plans and some ideas of what that might look like, and the site that it'll be on, the former Princess Louise First School site. So again, still very much in planning, with consultation planned for the spring or the summer term. So again, elected members and local community will see a lot more detail on that in the coming months. Darrasall Primary as part of the Ponteland reorganisation, again, that's a school build that was completed on time and on budget, and again you can see that that is looking lovely in the blue skies that are shining over Ponteland at that point. A building you'll probably all be familiar with if you've been visiting County Hall during the construction, but again a lovely new building for Morpeth First School that gave the school their very first ever playing field. So again, that has been certainly well used, particularly under COVID restrictions. It's given the schools a real opportunity to enhance their outdoor learning. Again, investment in Hayden Bridge, I think as we suggested, you know, £5.4 million. Again, some of the images here you can see for the 14 to 16 agenda in terms of vocational provision that we've provided at the school, that is also shared with our adult learning service to provide additional learning opportunities for the community as well as for the pupils at the school. Otterburn Primary School, again, as part of their conversion, we needed to provide a new classroom for them, so a traditional built classroom at Otterburn Primary School. And the same for Greenhoff, they also needed an additional classroom space. So again, you can see where we knocked down a conservatory there and built a purpose-built classroom for them out at Greenhoff. Work is continuing at Hawtwhistle Academy to convert the middle school into a primary school, as previously mentioned. So you can see the work is progressing really well, and it will look a completely different building with a completely different feel when the work is done. Ponteland School and Leisure Development, obviously I spoke a lot about that, but you can see the image on the left is the artist impression of what we thought it would look like, and the reality is the image on the right. And here's just some general images internally of the school at the point of actually opening. So again, a fantastic resource. Some of the secondary science labs, general teaching classrooms, primary school in terms of their learning street, their libraries, and a general sort of classroom. And then the leisure element of the Ponteland development. So again, you can see the top image, that's a clip and climb enhancement to the project again for the community. In the distance, you can see there's a soft play area. Bottom left, we've obviously got the 6-lane 25-metre pool. The 100 station gym is the next image in the middle at the bottom of the pictures. And then the aqua play for the younger toddlers to give some water confidence in terms of the leisure centre. And then at the completion of the project, this is where we all fell into the jacuzzi. No, we didn't actually, but we could have done. And that's the spa. Moving on then to Hexa Queen Elizabeth scheme. Again, the image that you can see on the screen there is the grade 2 listed building that currently exists on site, and the new building will actually be built around that, with this being the front and main entrance to the school. Just a slight image of what the overall site will look like, and some artists' impressions of the finished building in terms of their library and some of their external courtyard spaces. And this was the image as of the 21st of January in terms of construction and how it's developing. In the background, you can see there's a 3G pitch that is already complete and will be used by the school from next week when they actually return. So everything is progressing well on site in terms of Hexa. Okay, I think we're back in the room. Thank you very much. I think that's the end of everything on the capital project.
That's great. Thank you very much for that, Sue, and thank you for the presentation as well. Kath, you want to come in there?
Yeah, just really to reinforce. I mean, looking at that presentation that Sue's given, it just demonstrates the significant amount of work that is constantly ongoing in relation to ensuring that our schools are fit for purpose. And it's not just about building new and unique buildings that we've been doing, but it's also all the ongoing maintenance work that continues throughout the year, and that Sue's team are responsible for delivering. I have been in the fortunate position of looking around some of the resources and some of the areas that we have rebuilt, and it is a phenomenal achievement. And I'm sure Sue will cringe when I say huge amount of respect goes out to her and her team for what they managed to deliver, and for the way that they ensure that each project is efficient in the way that it's costed out, and managed to get quite a lot more for the funding than perhaps we have ever expected. So great, massive amount of work. Sue's team, it never ends. It's like painting the Forth Road Bridge. It never ends. One project finishes, another one starts, actually even before the other one's finished. So some phenomenal achievements in the last couple of years or so.
No, that goes without saying, Kath. And I'm sure that some members would have been invited to see some of these sites in person were it not for the current restrictions that we're under. So it's good to see the presentation on what has been achieved. Guy?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, what Kath and Sue have said is completely right. And yourself, I've been fortunate enough to go around Ponteland, and it's an absolutely stunning piece of education and engineering. It's absolutely phenomenal what's been done there. I think the report is what it is. It's what's happened in the past, but it's proof that we're very capable in the future. You know, when we say we're going to build these schools, we do it. I think in the past there's probably been an attitude that, you know, well, we'll just wait for a bit of money from the government, you know, and we'll just do it here and there. Well, that's changed, and we're very proactive in looking at our school estate and spending our own money, which I think is fairly unique, certainly in the Northeast and probably the rest of England as well. It's unprecedented investments that we've done, and we've got unprecedented investment planned into our school estate as well, because you know, and it does need it. So we've proved we can do it. We've just got to keep at it and do it again.
Yeah, I seem to be didn't see any of the old desks that you had to lift the seats up and clean the inkwells out, as I was sort of used to. Probably none left now. Does anyone have any questions that they would like to ask? Any points you would like to raise? No, that's great. Many thanks, Sue, for both the presentation and your team's efforts with, as Kath has said, making that money go such a long way, and the work that is carried out for all of that work that's been involved in both the repairs and the builds. And with that, the recommendation is just to note the content of the report and the benefits to Northumberland maintained schools. Do we agree with that recommendation? Agreed. Great, thank you very much. The next item is item 8, which is school exclusions, and that'll be Sue again.
Thank you, Councillor Swinburne. Yes, the purpose of the report is to provide an update on the number of permanent and fixed exclusions within Northumberland schools and academies, and to provide also an update on the actions taken to reduce the numbers in light of the recommendations of the Facts, Task and Finish group that was set up previously. A report on the findings and recommendations of the Task and Finish group were presented to Facts at the end of November 2019. And since this time, officers have developed an action plan and are now looking to establish a multi-agency working group and a governance structure to develop the Northumberland strategic inclusion plan. And a draft copy of the action plan is also contained within appendices 1 of your report. However, due to the COVID pandemic, work hasn't progressed as quickly as we would have liked on formally adopting a strategic plan for inclusion. However, as set out in section 3 of the report, there has been a great deal of work undertaken to reduce and prevent exclusions across Northumberland. And I'd just like to highlight now some of the outcomes and the achievements that we've achieved over the last 12 months in terms of our work around exclusions. So as you can see on table 2 of the report, it sets out the number of permanent and fixed exclusions for the previous 6 academic years, together with the figures to date of the current academic year. And as you will see, there is a steady decline in the numbers since the peak in July 2018. And while some of the reduction in 2019-20 can be accounted for due to schools only being open to a limited number of pupils during part of the spring and summer terms, there are, however, early indications that that downward trend has continued into the autumn term of 2020. So when schools were fully open to all pupils, there was a reduction by over 33% in permanently excluded pupils and 20% reduction in fixed term compared to the same period in 2019. And the breakdown again of the exclusions by school for 2018-19 and 2019-20 are also shown in appendices 2 of your report. So that identifies the overall fall in exclusions by schools in more detail for you. So section 3 of the report provides an update on the progress for each of the 5 issues that were identified by the Task and Finish group. So I'll take each of those in turn just to provide some of the key achievements that have actually happened to address those issues first identified. So the first issue relates to reducing the number of pupils and the time they spend in alternative provision. So compared to the previous year in 1920, we've seen a reduction of 23 children overall on the roll of alternative provision. we have been able to reintegrate 19 children back into school. And we've also had targeted intervention and support for 104 learners, not only from the inclusion support team, but across the council support services and agencies to work with them to prevent permanent exclusions. So work is continuing, and we are starting to have an impact, as you can see from the overall numbers, as well as those in terms of being on the roll of the alternative provision. The second issue identified was about defining the roles and responsibilities of schools, academies, the local authority and alternative providers. Exclusions are everyone's problem. It has been proposed as part of the development of the 5-year inclusive strategy for Northumberland that a multi-agency group is established to develop a framework of services that will include the roles and responsibilities for each agency available to support those children and young people at risk of exclusion. So this is one part of work that still needs to be undertaken, and that will certainly be a key focus in the coming months for the group to address. The third issue identified was a concern that some pupils were being off-rolled in order to improve a school's examination or Ofsted outcome. And again, we've looked at this, the information that we hold within NCT to understand the level of pupil movement in more detail. So the data for 2018-19 showed us that there were 338 pupil movements within Northumberland schools, with most of these movements happening in the 7 high-stroke secondary schools, who were also had the highest fixed and permanent and fixed and permanent exclusions, apologies. It hasn't been possible to compare this data in 2019-20 due to the schools being closed to the majority of pupils, as I've already said, for part of the spring and summer term. But this data will continue to be collected in the future in order that we can develop an approach in the overall strategic plan for inclusion to address this particular issue. And again, will be a key focus of the group moving forward. The fourth issue identified was to develop better strategies for early intervention of pupils at risk of exclusion, with appropriate intervention including those from alternative provision, early help, family support, our SEN support services, and to make sure that they were put in place to maintain that pupils remain in mainstream education where appropriate. I think, as you'll see from the report, within the detail of the report under section D, the main focus of the last year has been about prevention and early intervention, and some of the key achievements. I'd just like to list some of the key achievements that have been achieved. So we have been able to secure some additional funding to expand the capacity of the inclusion support worker team in order to work more preventatively with schools and academies. And you'll see in the report there are 2 case studies from parents in appendices 3 that really demonstrate the excellent work that the team have done over the most challenging circumstances over the last 12 months. Hopefully you'll take some time to read that and see the impact that the work is having on individual children and their family. A study has also taken place to establish the use of the early help referral process to support children and young people at the risk of permanent exclusion. And the findings have shown us that the services are not routinely used by schools. So the promotion of these services and to ensure greater take-up will also be a focus of the multi-agency group moving forward, and how to get the message across to schools and make sure that those services are known about and actually used moving forward. There's also been some developments, and in spring 2020 an officer scrutiny exclusion group was established, and this involves agencies across education and social care to track and scrutinise permanent and fixed term exclusions and implement the appropriate interventions for the individual child or young person. So again, putting the child at the heart and wrapping the services around the child to make sure they get the support that they need and find their way through to the most appropriate education provision. Also, since September 2020, our SEND support services to schools have been free of charge. So at the point of need, with the aim of supporting learners to maintain their placements in mainstream schools wherever possible. And whilst it's very early days and given the disruption in schools, the initial impact of this strategy is encouraging, with schools engaging with services appropriately to support children and young people requiring additional support to keep them in mainstream or to find a suitable alternative place. So further details on these initial findings are contained in the SEN debriefing paper that went to Schools Forum and can also be found in the background papers of your report. So moving on, the fifth issue that was identified were the potential barriers to learning, and the group felt that due to the current national school accountability structure provides little incentive or scope for schools to offer a curriculum option that keeps vulnerable children engaged in mainstream education. So the COVID pandemic has had an impact on the progress in this area due to the competing demands of schools and providers. However, some early discussions have taken place with some of our schools in Northumberland who have expressed an interest in developing their curriculum offer at both Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4. But again, further discussions also need to take place with all Northumberland schools, alternative providers and our own learning and skills team to make further progress in this area. Again, also to feed into the overarching strategy that will be developed. The sixth issue identified was a recognition that alternative providers need to support children at the risk of exclusion. So not just those that have been excluded, but to prevent exclusions. So again, the number of schools using alternative provision as a preventative measure has increased during the previous year, with all bar one of our high schools using the alternative providers in a preventative way. So although for a small number of pupils, we can actually see that the confidence and the trust between the two, between schools and our alternative providers is growing, and starting to see the benefit of working together to deliver the best for Northumberland children. Really, just to conclude then, really our next steps are, and the aim for the next 12 months is to develop a 5-year inclusive strategy for Northumberland. And the strategy will need to have, I think as previously agreed with this committee, a clear and moral purpose that makes exclusions and the responsibilities of everyone in Northumberland. And I think we're starting to make some inroads in that in terms of the work that we've already done. We need to have a financial realism through a shared understanding of the high needs block funding. And again, I think you'll see from the reports that we are making some significant progress in terms of the overspend against that budget, and hopefully cut that by around a fifth for the end of the current financial year. We also need a robust core purpose supported and agreed by regulation and fair processes. So again, working in partnership, building on the relationships that we've developed, or the stronger relationships we've developed through the COVID pandemic, we hope will be good foundations to build on to achieve that. And also the urgent and driving actions that we need to create a coherent core offer of support that schools subscribe to and drive down exclusions and encourage inclusive practice. And again, I think the report does set out the inroads that we've started to have in terms of delivering that and working together for the best of all Northumberland children. That concludes the highlights of the report. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much for that, Sue. Do we have any questions with regards to that report, please? No? Well, obviously, I just wanted to add that, I've mentioned previously when first presenting the initial report there, the task and finish group quickly found that there was a significant amount of detail that we wanted to make sure were captured in the background work of that. The effect on a child being excluded isn't just as simple as missing a few days off school, as some might think, but there can be significant long-term effects to so many people involved, and we knew it was more than just about the numbers. Now, obviously, as has been mentioned, COVID will have had an effect on some of these results, and I'm disappointed that it also meant that we haven't been able to progress further than we'd hoped, but that will come. But to see some significant reduction in numbers is only part of the fantastic results that so far been achieved. For me, reading the excerpts that have been included within the report will hopefully go some way to show some of the actual impact that these numbers have had on the individuals concerned. There's more than just numbers on the sheet. They're children who can grow, who can now get a better education, a better career, and a better chance for the future, and those around them. So when you see the table on page 167 and see the minus signs on there, just think that each one of those is an extra opportunity for an individual. And my thanks go to all those that have been involved, both in the committee, in the task and finish group, and involved in all of this work that has produced these results so far, and will carry on producing the results that will come from the additional work. And I really, really do mean thanks to all those involved. It's been a fantastic effort. And I shudder to think what would have happened if this hadn't been addressed and we hadn't started that task and finish work. The results were horrendous. You know, there's members on here obviously that were involved in that. The results were horrendous, and we've made some significant improvements, but it's not just about the numbers, it's the impacts to the individuals themselves and to those around them. So thanks to everyone that's been involved in this. And thanks for the report, Sue. So the recommendations are that the content of the report be noted, paying particular attention to the impact the work undertaken within children's services and schools has had on the lives of Northumberland children. Note the actions taken to reduce the number of fixed and permanently excluded children and young people, and the next steps being taken to improve the support to keep children in education, and identify any further areas for scrutiny. Can we agree those recommendations? Agreed? That's great, thank you. So the next item is children who are electively home educated. Now we have Sarah Wintringham who's going to explain the report, but I'm going to hand you over to Kath first as a starter.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I really just wanted to say that this is an annual report that we provide in relation to elective home education, but this year's been a pretty critical year and an interesting year in terms of the numbers of children where their parents have opted to electively home educate, and has encouraged some scrutiny and some oversight, both via Ofsted, who've done a little bit of research around this, and also from the DFE, and that will continue as time goes on. We've not particularly had an increase in the numbers requesting electively home ed in the last couple of weeks since the announcement of the return to school, but we have seen an increase in the numbers overall for the last year. So I will hand over to Sarah now, who I am sure will provide you with an overview of the numbers and the details about elective home education.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm Sarah Wintringham, Principal Education Welfare Officer, and I'm here on behalf of Jane Walker. And just like Kath said, to talk to you about our children who are electively home educated. So the key issues outlined in the report are the number of children being electively home educated in Northumberland since 2020 has increased quite sharply. The lack of contact of electively home educated children with professionals can, in a small number of cases, raise concerns around their safeguarding and the quality of the education they're receiving. And we have had contact from members of the EHA community in Northumberland who've expressed concerns about their children being invisible during the pandemic because they're not at school and they're losing those opportunities to socialise with their peers. So I'll give you some figures about where we are at currently. We have 297 children in Northumberland that are home educated. 146 of those are new cases since September. But within that period, we've also had 57 children return to school. Initial conversations with parents in September around the reasons about why they wanted to home educate the children was very much around COVID-related anxiety and whether or not they felt their children were going to be safe in school when the schools returned. But we also found that for a lot of parents, as a lifestyle change, it really works for their children, and their children began to thrive. They weren't under that pressure of the routines about going to school, and that philosophy around home education just worked for those families. So they wanted to continue to do that with their children. On the whole, we have really good engagement from our parents of our children who are home educated, which has meant that we only now have a few outstanding reviews that haven't been completed with parents yet. As I say, it works really well for a lot of families, and we receive some outstanding evidence from parents of the work that their children are doing. Very detailed work plans, photographs of them being out in the community when they can be, doing things in forests and that more practical side of the education for children that maybe did struggle in school with you know, certain lessons. Following the announcement that the exams wouldn't take place this year, we contacted all of our Year 11 parents and informed them about the consultation that the DfE were doing around exams, and gave them the link to that so they could feed into that. And once DfE released the list of possible centres for external candidates, we will share those with our Year 11 parents, just so they're fully aware of where their children can get their exam results, because I think there was an issue last year that they didn't feel that their exams or their outcomes were taken into account by DfE, so that's, you know, quite a positive move for the parents. What we also took note of was that the COVID did have an impact on the children's emotional health and well-being. So we worked with our colleagues in educational psychology, and we devised an online resource, Padlet, for parents of children who are home educated. And on there was a wide range of resources about training that's open to EHE parents and children, and signposts to agencies that can help with emotional health and well-being. Because we felt it was really important that they had access to those resources as well. We have, in order, when we started having children returning back into school, we found that some of them were really struggling with that. So we built capacity within the education welfare team, and we appointed education welfare support officers. So when our electively home educated children return back to school, we can help support that transition with a member of staff, because sometimes they find it really difficult going back into those routines in school. So we can offer that reintegration support for those children. We have 26 children with EHCPs who are electively home educated, and we work with our colleagues in SEND to ensure that the education is being delivered by parents is in line with the outcomes on their plan. So we work closely with those colleagues as well. We have a multi-agency strategy in place, and this is a route for professionals who have concerns around children who are home educated. So there's a pathway for sharing concerns with other agencies. So that was in place in September, and that seems to be embedded now and working quite well. We do have a small number of families that don't engage with us when we try to make contact with them around evidence of work and supplying that to us, which has led us this year to issuing 28 initial school attendance orders. And that's the beginning of a legal process where if parents fail to satisfy us that they're providing a suitable education, we can issue an order so that that child returns to school. However, out of the 28 that we issued, 20 of those provided evidence of work following that notice, and that work was deemed to be suitable. So that was really, you know, quite positive. And we had one of those children whose parents said, you know, I am struggling. So we supported them, and their child has now returned to school and is doing well. We have 7 outstanding, but we've been unable to process those with regards to the school closures and COVID. So moving forward, we do think there may be a little bit of a peak in the numbers over the next couple of weeks. However, I think early indicators would show that it won't be at the same level as it was in September. Conversations with parents suggest that because of the rollout of the vaccination and that the children are now going to be tested in school, there's that kind of reassurance from parents that the children are going to be safe in school. So, you know, the education welfare team are, you know, we'll work relentless with these parents to support and offer guidance where we can within our roles and responsibilities, and we'll continue to support the families and children the best way we can moving forward. And that's pretty much it. I don't know if anybody's got any questions.
That's great. Thank you very much for that, Sarah. John Sanderson.
Hi, Sarah. It's not a question really. It's just an observation that kind of 3 or 4 years ago, when this became an emerging issue, I think there was a lot of ignorance about the situation. The work that you've undertaken, and Jane, I think has moved things on dramatically, and I think we'll have a much clearer picture. Clearly the provision is better, and I think it's part of the emerging picture post-COVID, where young people are going to have a variety of places where they can get appropriate education with the appropriate support. You've got the online learning, but clearly the intervention of the education welfare team has been massive. So really, it's just a compliment that the picture we've got now is vastly improved from what it was 2-3 years ago. So well done.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. Kath?
Just to reiterate a little bit about what John's saying, I think, and not that we do everything for Ofsted in any stretch of the imagination, but Ofsted also recognised the services that we provide to our electively home educated children and young people as well. So I think it's just moving on from what John was saying there.
That's good to know. Do you have any more questions? Okay, well, the recommendations are that members note the impact of COVID-19 on the number of families choosing to electively home educate their children, and members note the national recognition of the need for changes to legislation relating to elective home education. Can we agree those recommendations, please? All agreed? That's great, thank you, and thank you for that, Sarah. I know it's your first time delivering on these reports.
Thank you.
Okay, now we'll move on to item 10, which is the work programme. Chris?
Thanks, Chair. It's really just for members to know, as always, if there's anything members want to add to the work programme. I know we've only got sort of, we haven't got very long left, but if there's anything members want me to make a note of for when we come back after May, I'm more than happy to do that. Next month, there's a report on North of Tyne, which I think should cover some of the stuff that Councillor Daly raised earlier in the meeting. But at the moment, the work programme is just for note.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Chris. Now, item 11 we have as urgent business. Although not specifically urgent, there has been a question raised with regards to the return to schools next week. And as a result of that, we've asked for a verbal report. Kath is going to give us all a verbal report with regards to the school reopening. So I'm going to pass this over to Kath now, please.
Thanks, Chair. Just by way of a starter, just to say, and I'm hoping that this doesn't sound like a repetition, but just to say how proud I am of the team and what they've achieved over the last year. I'm proud of them all of the time, but particularly over the last year, because it has been a significantly different way of working for the education and skills team. And we've had some changes in personnel, and that there's been a seamless transition from our previous service director to our current interim service director. So huge thank you to all of the team for that. But mainly just to say, to reiterate what Guy has already said, but a huge thank you to our schools who have worked tirelessly through this pandemic to make sure that children and young people within the county have received not just an acceptable level of education, but also a quality education input across the last year. I think most schools have never closed, and they have managed effectively every challenge that's been thrown at them, and sometimes with very short timescales and very short turnaround times. And that's a testament to the leadership and the support that's provided from our head teachers and our governing bodies across the county, but also to all of the staff who work within our schools. And I think that without them over the last year, we would have been in a very difficult or a very different position. So just in terms of some of the things that we have done or that's taking place over the next few days or so, I really wanted to highlight that we have had a significant amount of our children who have remained at school during the most recent lockdown, and in some cases we've been quoted as having the highest number of attendees for some weeks in the country. So we are really pleased with that, because it has meant that for some of our vulnerable children, and for those children who have parents as key workers, that they've been able to maintain that routine and that school attendance in a way that what wasn't previously seen during the very first lockdown. So just some key issues. Our schools have really just got on, and we have had very little need for intervention or additional areas that schools haven't already thought of in relation to preparing for the more wider opening on Monday. Our early years and our primary schools will continue with home testing. We're aware that home testing for childminders has been missed, and we are lobbying DFE in order to try and encourage and facilitate childminders having access to home testing. Secondary schools and high schools began their some of them began their lateral flow testing on March the 1st prior to the return. So some schools have been doing that this week in order to be able to open earlier or open to more children earlier from next week, and that's been going well. Positive responses to that on social media, and we expect that all of our secondary schools will be fully open by Thursday the 11th of March, because they will be staggering the return in order to get testing done. Special schools obviously have not closed. They will continue to be expected. They will continue to be open as usual. We have had a number of our special school staff vaccinated, or we pushed to get a number of our special school staff vaccinated. Those who offered any kind of personal care to our children and young people, we felt they needed to be vaccinated, and that was in line with what the rest of the region were doing as well. So we did push for them to be vaccinated, but where they undertook personal care duties. School transport will just continue as usual. This is almost like a well-oiled cog. There will obviously be the odd bump, I'm sure, along the road, excuse the pun, but Mark Cusack and his team have managed to keep school transport going, even with the different routes and the different organisations and the changing numbers of children attending on each day. They've managed to keep that going, and those transport providers will be supported via lateral flow testing. We've provided or topped up PPE to our schools in response to the updated guidance. Over 2,000 masks have been sent out, but schools can also access PPE on their own, and we know that schools contact us if they have any difficulty accessing that PPE. We've provided input and information sessions for our schools, as we have done throughout, in relation to HR, health and safety, any public health questions that might be raised, and we've continued with our COVID updates on a very regular basis. Post-16 skills service will open fully from March the 8th, from Monday the 8th, and they've been very good at getting their testing processes up and running quite quickly. Music partnership will resume face-to-face tuition from Monday the 8th as well, so that's really good news. And the health and safety team continue to support schools with any risk assessments or individual queries, as does Liz Morgan's team from a public health perspective. So I don't know if anybody's got any questions or any queries or any issues or concerns that they want to raise, but myself and the team will be happy to answer those.
Any questions from anybody? No. Thanks very much for going through that, Kath. I appreciate it was at short notice, and it's not really a full report, but I'm aware that if members are asking or were asking these things, then no doubt many other people will be asking those questions as well. It was many people were looking forward to an announcement being made. So we weren't sure exactly, but I'm quite confident that yourself and the team of people around you had been making preparations anyway, awaiting that such an announcement. Always prepared, as the saying goes. So thanks very much for bringing that information forward. With that, we've nothing further to discuss. Our next meeting is on April the 1st, April Fool's Day, and that will be the last meeting of the Family and Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny of this current term. So I'll look forward to seeing you all then, and everyone take care until then. Thanks very much. Thank you.